Okay, so we're going live. Welcome to a new current conversations. We are very excited to be talking to Garrison Superintendent Carl Albano, who's taking time out of this holiday break. So we really appreciate you coming in tonight to talk to us and give us an update halfway through the school year and looking ahead to the next few months. As always, we have time for your questions from the public. You can just go into the Q&A button that you'll find along the bottom of your screen, and we'll get through as many as we can in the half hour that we have. And I'm gonna, without further ado, pass it over to our editor, Chip Rowe, who's gonna be running the show.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you, Carl, for taking the time. I in the middle of a week off, I guess, for the students, but you don't get a week off, right? I mean, you're still working.
That's true, Chip. We work this week. We get a lot done. It's a quiet week.
Well, we spoke back in August, and I did go back and read our conversation on the phone because I remember when we spoke, it was really wide open. It was really hard to predict how it was going to go. Garrison was doing it differently than a lot of districts because you were small and you can do the social distancing. And I think the plan was always to have as many kids as wanted to come back. But then the district also got ITutor. So if the parents wanted to keep them remote, they could. And so I guess halfway through, I wanted to check in with you how it's been going, if there was anything that we didn't discuss that kind of surprised you, that we didn't think of, I guess, and how the students are doing. I was curious if you've seen, well, that's enough questions for starting. We'll go one at a time. So how are things, how's your assessment of what's happened halfway through? Where do you think you are?
Well, I'll start by answering what surprised me. Because when we spoke in late August, I really thought we would maintain in-person school at best through the end of October, maybe get to Thanksgiving. Back then it was interesting. We really just thought with school returning, there was this idea that infection would spread more rapidly than with the holidays and the cold weather and people moving indoors. And I wasn't alone in that. I think my superintendent colleagues across the region, also the admin team and the staff in the school, we really thought at best we would get to Thanksgiving. But here we are, February. And I'm happy to say that we've maintained in-person school, not 100% consistently. We did have in Garrison, we had 3 school closures, one in November, another in December, and then we had a temporary one last month. But those were all due to quarantines.
Right.
So it really wasn't due to in-person spreading in school. So that was a surprise for me. Schools, I think what we've learned, and you're hearing this from the CDC and all the epidemiologists that are studying this, you're hearing that schools are relatively safe. And why? Because in Garrison, as you pointed out earlier, Chip, we're fortunate. We're not working harder or smarter than anyone else. We just have this situation of 60,000 square feet and 215 students. And that is completely unique in this area, at least as far as I know. And that enabled us to invite everyone back, maintain a 6-foot radius around every student and staff member. And then, of course, all the other protocol, the masks, the disinfecting, we upgraded the air filters, we followed all of that other guidance. But I think being able to spread out, keeping the students in cohorts, and opening windows. That was the other thing that we did. Even in the cold weather, we tell our students, dress warm, bring a sweater, bring a jacket.
Right.
But I think fresh air, that has all seemed to work, because I go back to the 3 closures, and each time our staff members now have to interact. We have a lot of collaboration amongst staff members, a lot of team teaching, co-teaching. So they're interacting with one another. They had exposure to one another. And in a small place like Garrison, if you lose 10 teachers, that is 1/3 of your faculty.
Sure.
So, and we just simply don't have enough subs to cover them. So that is where we decided to go remote. In each case, it was roughly a week to 10 days of remote, but mainly it was due to quarantines. But the good news is, although we had one infected staff member, all the others who quarantined, no one ever became ill with COVID as a result of their exposure. So again, I think the mask wearing, the disinfecting, the windows open, the upgraded air filters, it does seem to work. And to our knowledge, that same applies to our students. You know,
Right.
the students had to quarantine as well. In some cases, not the entire building. In some cases, it was 2, 3, 4 classes. But to our knowledge, there has been no in-school spread.
Right.
So
Right.
all of that, I must say, is surprising to me. Back in August, I would not have believed that's how this would play out.
And when you, not to say it's like the weak link, but when you did have exposure, is it visitors coming in, or is it teachers or students getting it elsewhere? I mean, they're obviously interacting with someone who infected them, but they bring it in. I think at one point there was a visitor or something that kind of came in, or for one of the shutdowns, or was it mostly just teachers who were tested positive?
In nearly every case, it was a staff member,
Okay.
not a visitor.
Right. Okay.
We actually don't allow visitors, but if we do, if it's an important reason for a visitor to be there, like our lockdown drill, for example, the police officers
Sure.
do assist us, but we do a screening. You know, their temperature check, they have to go through the screening process, but that's rare. No, in all 3 cases, it was a staff member.
Okay.
We believe that they contracted SARS and asymptomatic. They went through a health screening and but then contracted it in school. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I know what you mean. Out of school.
After they became symptomatic.
Right.
Yeah, my apologies.
Well, how is the staff doing with the vaccinations? I have what a percentage at this point? Most of them have probably gotten the first shot, but the teachers, this with Haldane too, and talking to Dr. Benante, it is kind of, the state has sort of left the teachers up, in the air, like they have to take care of it themselves, right? I mean, they have to go and get their own appointments, and they do have priority, but it's still, there's been no kind of organization as far as, coming into a district and just getting them all vaccinated. Is that impression correct?
Partially correct. So,
Okay.
so across the state, it has been a struggle in many school districts in many different counties. For us, I must say Putnam County Health Department has been fabulous. It is the first come, first serve, but whenever they open up a pod for educators, they will send out a link to all of the schools. And they did that. Our timing was very good. Probably about a month ago, during a faculty meeting, a link came through. So I stopped the faculty meeting and I said, okay, everyone log out of the Zoom and log on to this link and make your appointment.
Sure.
So our timing was fantastic. And at that one opening, probably about 2/3 of our staff were able to secure an appointment.
Oh, good.
So right now we have next Thursday, we have the last group of teachers, about 20 teachers will be going for their second dose. And after that 20 staff members, we're up to about 80%, or we will be at 80% receive the second dose.
Oh, that's great.
So that's fantastic. And then of course, 2 weeks later is when you are protected. It's not right after the second dose. They're saying 2 weeks later. And the great news, what I heard from the Department of Health today, is that teachers 2 weeks after your second dose, if you are exposed, you will not need to quarantine. You're considered protected. So
Right.
avoiding the quarantines will enable us, I believe, to maintain in-person school and avoid future closures. We may have to go remote for students, but not for staff.
Yeah, what happens now, this is tough in a way for you guys because you look at like ITutor, so you had to go in August or whenever we were discussing it and quickly arrange for this remote learning system with real teachers, certified teachers and all that, doing it online, because I think as we discussed, you don't have the staff to run two schools, right? You can't do a remote school plus an in-person school. But I was thinking today, you have to plan at some point what you're going to do in the fall. I mean, you have to renew your contract probably with iTutor if you decide. I mean, how are you going to make these decisions, or when do you make them? I guess, do you wait till June or July and try to see what the landscape is as far as the fall? As far as, I guess it's more requiring everybody to come in person, which, are you going to be able to do that by the fall at the pace we're going?
So those are great questions. As you know, the budget process starts now. The board adopts a budget in April. The public then votes on the budget in May. So that process is already happening. And to be honest with you, at this point, I'm not recommending iTutor to be part of the budget for September.
Okay.
Now, that being said, it was never in the budget for this year.
Right.
What we were allowed to do, and Garrison again was fortunate, we were able to use fund balance because it was a COVID-related, unexpected expense. So we were able to use fund balance, and we were fortunate that we had the fund balance to cover the expense. But it is about $500,000, so it's a significant expense. But we really felt strongly about giving families the option back in August. And it's funny when you look back to August, the positivity rate was so low. I mean, it was between 1% and 2%. That was probably the safest time
Right.
over the course of the pandemic, right? But there was a lot of anxiety, and probably, if I remember correctly, we had roughly 55 children who were enrolled in iTutor for the start of the school year. And then we had approximately 140 or 150 in person. So that's how we started the year. Now I believe there are about 30 students on iTutor, but some are actually planning to come back over the next couple of weeks. So if we're fortunate and the infection rate, the positivity rate declines, I could see us in the near future having most of those students from iTutor return to in-person. And we're excited about that.
Yeah.
But we're giving them the option for the remainder of the year. But going back to your original question, next year, right now, I don't plan to budget for iTutor. If we're required, let's say due to the variants, of course that's a concern for everyone. If these variants take hold and positivity rates increase, and we are told by New York State that we need to provide a remote option as well as an in-person option, it is something we may revisit in the summer, but it won't be part of the upcoming budget process.
So you really have to look to the state for guidance on this. I mean, if you're going to say in the fall, Garrison, in effect, any district, not just Garrison, but any district can't just say, everybody's got to come to school. It really has to come from the state level to say, mandatory, we're not going to do remote learning anymore, because you think by September, I wouldn't be confident we'd be at that point with the way the vaccination, it's kind of the slow rollout of it. So I imagine districts will still have to be offering it in some form, but like, as you said, it does seem like the numbers of people who are comfortable with having the children go back to the school, as we talked about earlier, it's almost like safer in the school outside, with the infection rates, and everybody's kind of has to wear masks, and it's a really controlled environment and that kind of thing. But speaking of the budget, so right now, is it still kind of up in the air as far as what the state's going to give Garrison, or are you expecting you'll still get, I mean, I think it's about 900,000 or $1 million that comes to Garrison. Is that more or less what you have to plan on at this point? Or it's, I mean, I still have a month before they get into those nitty gritty of it, but, or have there been indications like there was talk, they're going to cut it 20%, you should prepare for that? What is the board kind of looking at?
There was some talk of a 20% cut earlier in the school year. But right now, the information we're receiving is it looks like that may not happen, and we may receive our full state aid. And for Garrison, we're actually a little lower than what you quoted, Chip. I think we're about 800,000.
Yeah. Okay.
So you know, we're counting on that. And we're hopeful, you know, through our network, you know, we have liaisons at the state level. Our representatives, we've been speaking with them, and you know, with this national, you know, COVID relief package that's being discussed, we're hopeful that the districts will be made whole. And you know, we're, you know, to look for extra, that may not be in the cards, although our school districts and through Westchester Putnam School Boards Association, we have been advocating for some additional relief, for PPE, for extra transportation expenses and things such as that. But me personally, I'm not counting on an increase, and I would be very happy if we received, you know, what we expect and
Sure.
we just made whole.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I talked about this with Dr. Benanti as well, and he pointed out that, you know, Garrison and Haldane are a pretty good situation anyway. You have some savings. It isn't like Beacon, you know, it's not a place that, not that you don't depend on it, but you have ways, I think Garrison and Haldane have ways they can work around it if that was reduced. But yeah, I noticed that the first time I'd seen in the COVID relief package that the word schools was included. And I think local municipalities are probably in the same boat, you know, just some money to, because I think we talked about in August, there's a lot of expense just in, you know, the air filters and the meeting the standards. And I do think, I know that you and the board has been very happy with the school nurse, Melissa taking the lead on this, and that certainly contributed to how smooth it's gone. I'm sure just kind of having those systems in place, and I can say even with my own son who's in the 8th grade, just it's been very easy to kind of know what you have to do before he goes in, and so it is kind of interesting how that's inside the schools is kind of a model for what we should be doing. Probably other places too. So I looked up today, you've done okay. I mean, 5 students and 7 teachers that tested positive, which seems for a size of Garrison about what we might have expected in August. And I thought it was really interesting that no one in quarantine has gotten sick, which I kind of spoke to the masks, you know, the importance of that. So how do you see the remainder of the school year going? I'm going to ask you like I did in August, I guess, to predict. Okay. You know, we've got 6 months. Where do you think we'll be by the summer?
Well, I'm going to remain optimistic.
Okay.
And so post Christmas and New Year's, the rate really spiked. You know, we Putnam County hit 10%, maybe a little above. But now we're back under 5%. There's been a steady decline, which is I think very promising. You know, I think that speaks to people being careful. It probably speaks to people starting to get vaccinated. So that's all very helpful, and that makes me optimistic. I must say, though, the variants are certainly an area of concern that we're keeping an eye on. We're trying to understand. But for example, just earlier today with our local Department of Health, I posed the question, do we know if the variant is in our area in Putnam County? We are not testing for it. So if someone tests positive, we don't know if it's just COVID-19 or if it's the variant from the UK or from South Africa or Brazil. So some places across the country, they are testing for variants, but in our immediate area, they're not. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the variant is here. It seems to be across the United States. And I think that will play an important role in what the remainder of the school year looks like.
Yeah.
I heard it described as, it's a race between the vaccine and the variant, and if we can ramp up, ahead of the air, it seems effective against it. So I'm hopeful that if the rate continues to decline or stays stable, that more students will return, and without teachers in in-person school for the remainder of the school year. Then, the summer, if it follows the pattern of last summer, I would hope that the rate would really drop low. People getting outdoors, and even if you're getting together with family or friends or extended, groups, you're doing that outdoors, which is certainly safer. And with more people getting vaccinated, I think there is a good chance the rate can be very low in the summer, and we may, be able to return. I think September we'll have masks, we'll have disinfecting, we'll have air filters. I think all the protocol will be there, but I do believe we'll be in person.
Yeah. Now, how much testing have you been doing? Have you been getting all the tests you need? And I assume that the tests are really just to give you an idea of if there is infection. You haven't had any, when you've done the testing, you haven't had positives, I don't think, right? It's always been like everybody tested was negative. Like when you've done.
No, actually, we learned about two.
Oh, really?
We learned about two positive. Yeah, so I'll back up a bit. We're using a Bionex antigen rapid test. It's provided by New York State free of charge. You have to send in a request for it, and New York State Department of Health's response has been a bit slow. But we got our first shipment of 70 about 2 months ago, and then we just received a follow-up shipment about 3 weeks ago, an additional 80 tests. So we're in pretty good shape. Our strategy, we started on Martin Luther King Day. You mentioned Nurse Melissa DeFonce earlier.
Yeah,
she's wonderful. She volunteered to come in. She came in on a holiday, and she tested students. And then the next morning, she came in early before school hours and tested staff members. And we made it strictly voluntary. But that first week, we did discover one positive asymptomatic staff member.
Oh, okay.
And one positive asymptomatic. So, they're included in our numbers. The good news is we learned about it and they right away quarantined. Thank God both are healthy right now. They're back on their feet, the student and the staff member. But the good news is we avoided having them even enter the building and interact with others. So it avoided quarantines, certainly avoided, any potential of infecting someone else. So the testing does work. And I think that's proof that it does work. We proactively avoided, we probably would have been forced to go remote in that situation.
Right.
So Melissa has every week, our goal is to test approximately 5% of staff and students weekly. We've been a little bit short of that because we're making it voluntary right now. We're not insisting.
You're right.
So, it's a little difficult, particularly for parents to get up before school hours and drop your child off. It's a bit of a challenge. I could see us at some point, though, increasing that if we could obtain more tests.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking the school is small enough, you could almost, if the tests were more available, you could do 50% or, a lot more testing, which again is unique kind of to Garrison. So, well, we've gone for almost a half an hour. You've covered everything I could think of. I was wanted to just see, actually, in the beginning, you had talked about what surprised you about the school year. Did anything kind of go as you thought it would go? I guess the plan was worked out pretty well. Was there anything in August?
Yeah.
I guess, was there anything else in August you didn't anticipate? Although it was hard because when we were discussing
I'm sorry,
it,
the question is, was there
air.
anything in August?
Say again?
And I'm sorry, the question is there something in August I did not anticipate?
Yeah, I guess so. I
did?
just remember back to our conversation. It was there was just so hard to predict what was going to happen. And so did anything arise that totally shocked you or surprised you? Or I guess you would think, I didn't think of that. I can't believe we didn't think of that. Or was it pretty much, we covered it all? With the masks, the sanitizing, you had the remote learning. I mean,
Chip, the protocol that we put in place at the beginning of the school year, for the most part, is the protocol that's in place now.
yeah.
And of course,
okay.
that was CDC guidance. We had our task force. I mean, we had a lot of smart, dedicated people around the table to develop the plan. And one of the lead people in that was Nurse Melissa, of course. The only thing, the travel, what may have changed a bit was tracking all the travels. So whether it be staff or families, and that guidance changed. At first, you weren't able, there was a travel restriction, then it loosened up. Then it was contiguous states,
Right.
and it kept so keeping up with that was a bit of a challenge, and we did change our screener to reflect that. But I got to tell you, the community was fantastic. Staff and parents alike would proactively tell us when they were traveling, and work with us. So and seek out the guidance and say, okay, well, gee, look, I needed to visit family out of state. When can my child come back, and that kind of thing. So, the cooperation has been phenomenal. And I must say the biggest surprise is that we were able to maintain in-person school as long as we did, including right up till now. I did think, maybe by November, we would be remote, and probably remote for the entire winter. That is what I expected.
Yeah.
And pleasantly surprised that that's not the case.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm kind of losing my light. Maybe that's a sign that we should hang it up. But I appreciate the time, and I'll check in with you again in June. We'll see where we are. But my assessment, it seems to have gone relatively well in the schools. So let's hope the rest of society can catch up with that. Yes. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Chip, and I'm happy to come back.
Okay, we'll have Teresa come back and wrap it up for us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll be posting this online tomorrow for those who couldn't attend. So there will be a link to watch the recording. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.